I will call the special meeting of January 24th, 2023 to order, occurring both in person and via Zoom. City Clerk Guzetta, please take the roll.
Councilmember Barbadillo.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chua.
Here.
Councilmember Lian.
Here.
Councilmember Fan.
Present.
Mayor Montano.
Here. Thank you very much. And now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone stand, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may sit. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to give a couple of proclamations, and this is for the Lunar New Year proclamations. And I will go down to the podium and give the proclamations. The Vietnamese Lunar New Year, January 22nd, 2023. This January 22nd, we celebrate Tet, or the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, also known as Tet Nguyen Dan, or Feast of the First Morning of the First Day. It celebrates the arrival of spring based on the Vietnamese calendar. This year is identified as the Year of the Cat. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Carmen Montano, and on behalf of the City Council, proclaim January 22nd, 2023, a Vietnamese Lunar New Year in the city of Milpitas, and hope that this year brings good health, happiness, and prosperity. So with that, I would like to invite Ban Lan Trung to come and receive the proclamation. So I will read the proclamation. So the City of Milpitas proclamation. Whereas the City of Milpitas enjoys the privilege of a richly diverse population, and Milpitas is home to a large Vietnamese American population and is fortunate to share its rich and vibrant culture. And whereas Tet, or the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, is one of the most important celebrations in Vietnamese culture. And whereas Tet Nguyen Dan, which means Feast of the First Morning of the First Day, celebrates the arrival of spring based on the Vietnamese calendar. And I already said that, so I'm going to give it to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Truly, my honor. Thank you.
And the next one is for John. Come on up, John. So this one is the Chinese Lunar New Year, January 22nd, 2023 as well. Face that way. So this one, Lunar New Year, also known as the Spring Festival, marks the start of the Chinese lunar calendar. This year, we celebrate the Year of the Rabbit. I, Mayor Carmen Montano, and on behalf of the City Council, proclaim January 22nd, 2023 as Chinese Lunar New Year in the city of Milpitas, and hope this year brings good health, happiness, and prosperity to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming here and accepting the proclamation from myself and the City Council. So moving on now, let's move on to the public forum. Members of the public are invited to speak on any item that does not appear on today's agenda. Public forum will be limited to 1 minute. So call for speakers on the council chamber. If anyone would like to make any announcements, anybody in the public? Seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom? City Clerk?
We have one hand raised. That is Allison McDonald.
Okay. Hello, Allison.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I would like to invite all the members of council and public to join us on Saturday, February 4th, 9 for a breakfast and a presentation by Chris Norwood. He's going to talk about the value of Black history and growing up in Milpitas. I think it'll be really interesting, and hope you can join us. We'll have coffee and pastries at 9 and then the presentation. Thank you. It's at the San Jose City College Extension, and there will be, we're going to try to also present it via Zoom. So if you want a Zoom link, contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving on to Zoom. Any City Clerk, is there anyone on Zoom? Oh, you already did. Never mind. Sorry about that. Okay. Moving on to announcement of conflict of interest and campaign contributions. We have City Attorney Michael Mutalapasi.
Thank you, Mayor. I ask you, Mayor, and each of the council members whether he or she has any financial or personal conflicts of interest related to any of the items on tonight's agenda. Councilmember Barbadillo?
None.
Vice Mayor Chua?
None.
Councilmember Lien?
None.
Councilmember Fan?
None.
And Mayor?
None.
Let the record reflect there are no reported conflicts. We do not need to discuss campaign contributions as there are no items on tonight's agenda that would relate to that.
Thank you very much. And now I will move on to read the code of conduct. The code of conduct. Be respectful and courteous. Words, tone, and body language do matter. Model civility. Avoid surprises. Praise publicly and criticize privately. Focus on the issue and not the person. Refrain from using electronic devices while on the city dais. Disclose conflict of interest and affiliations related to agenda items. Separate governing from campaigning. The council speaks with one voice after making a policy on issues. Respect the line between policy and administration. Council will hold one another accountable to comply with this code of conduct. Thank you very much. Now moving on to the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it was motioned by Vice Mayor Chua and seconded by Councilmember Fan. So now we are going to vote on the agenda.
Councilmember Barbadillo.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Lien.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Mayor Montano.
And I am an aye. Thank you. Moving on, we are going to the agenda item, adopt the Milpitas Housing Element Update, the sixth cycle, 2023 through 2031. The general plan resolution and addendum to the Milpitas General Plan Update Environmental Impact Report. So I will call on staff for the presentation. Assistant City Manager Ashwini Kantak and Economic Development Director Alex Andrade.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members. Ashwini Kantak, Assistant City Manager. I'm joined by Alex Andrade, our Economic Development Director, who's also currently overseeing housing. We also have members of the housing team, Hanson Home, who's our Senior Special Projects Associate and has played a very critical role in this effort. Our consultant team from Ramey and Associates, and our Planning Director, Ned Thomas, and his team. I'd just like to take a moment to recognize the months of hard work by this entire team on an important project We have heard from several sources that this particular round of updates to the housing element has been much more rigorous than the previous rounds, has thus been quite a complex and lengthy undertaking. And our staff, along with the consultant team, have been doing an amazing job on the housing element, working with several stakeholders and receiving input from the council, the housing subcommittee, and the community at large. We released a draft for public review in August of 2022 and submitted the first draft to the Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD, in mid-October. As you know, we met with the council in September, and since then, our staff has met with HCD several times to discuss their questions and concerns and incorporated their feedback into the draft housing element, which is in front of you today. We believe we have been thoughtful in our approach in drafting the housing element, and we've really tried to balance the need for housing with other uses in the city, keeping in mind long-term fiscal sustainability and maintaining a good jobs and housing mix. We are very much looking forward to the discussion with you tonight. And with that, I'll hand it off to Director Andrade to take you to the next part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Contact. Good evening, Mayor Montano, Vice Mayor Chua, and City Council members. We're really excited to discuss the city's housing element with you, as well as the Milpitas community tonight. I'd like to start by just a friendly reminder that our city's general plan is very important for this community, and that it is really the blueprint for development in the next 20 years. And the plan is really more about how we're going to live, work, educate, and recreate and socialize in the next 20 years. So the planning department has been leading that effort. The general plan was updated and approved by the city council in March of 2021. It's an important element of the housing element, or rather the general plan is an important component of the housing element, and vice versa. The California Housing and Community Development Department are responsible for ensuring that all state jurisdictions are in compliance with the housing element. We're now in our sixth cycle of the housing element, which runs from now 2023 through 2031. So it's an 8-year period. The housing element provides a coordinated strategy for producing needed housing and meets a variety of state and local community design, transportation, economic development, and sustainability values that are consistent with the general plan update. In the past 6 months, it's been an honor to operate both as your economic development director and on an interim basis overseeing the housing team, as our assistant city manager just mentioned. The experience has provided many learning opportunities, and it's clear that there's certainly a symbiotic relationship between economic development and housing. There's no doubt that the Bay Area's housing crisis continues with increases in home and rental prices, which places a burden on many households in Milpitas and across Silicon Valley. The good news is that the city has been very strategic and has been one of the most active in building housing in the region. That's a positive for our residents and for our community. The housing element will ensure that we plan and provide opportunities for development to address the housing needs of Milpitas across diverse groups, special needs populations, and all income levels. The city experienced a significant budget deficit the first couple of years of the pandemic, so it's imperative that we continue to think about the city's fiscal sustainability. Our residential lands and employment lands are both important. We have heard some council members speak about commercial lands and creating a balance between the commercial lands and residential development. As we progress on the housing element, we hear you, we understand, and we also agree there's an important balance that we're trying to achieve here, as are many communities across the Bay. Before I hand it over to Eric and Antara of Ramey Associates, staff is operating under a very aggressive but achievable timeline this month. On January 6th, just a few weeks ago, staff and consultant presented to the Housing Subcommittee. On January 11th, we presented to the Planning Commission, and of course, here we are on January 24th, presenting in front of you with the hope that you'll provide us back on the housing element, and we will able to proceed with the following actions, including adopting a City Council resolution, approval of an addendum to the 2040 General Plan EIR, adopting the General Plan amendment to the update of the housing element, and adopting the Milpitas General Plan Housing Element Update as substantially compliant by state law. This presentation is going to be very brief. We have 18 slides, but we have many backup slides that will help during the Q&A session. So I'm going to hand it over to Eric and Antara to start the presentation, and I'll see you again on the recommendation slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and good evening, and thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Eric Yurkovich. I'm a principal at Ramey & Associates. I'm joined by my colleague, Antara Tandon tonight. She and I are going to work through and both do the presentation. That'll be me, and she'll help us answer questions. This is a really exciting time, as you all know, as we really move towards the adoption of the city's sixth cycle housing element. Our team includes Ramey & Associates. We're the lead consultant on the team, but we're also joined by really terrific collaborators in Veronica Tam & Associates, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and Rincon Consultants. You can go to the next slide. So on the screen is really the outline for that presentation. We've been trying to keep the presentation relatively short this evening. So first, I'll walk through the housing element update process, the plan organization, the sites inventory, and then the housing element goals and programs. As part of that review, I'll summarize what changes we've made to the housing element based on public feedback and comments from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, as we call it. I will close then with some next steps on the process, and then we can take questions or comments that you have on the housing element. Next slide. So Alex covered a lot of this in his opening remarks, but just to reaffirm that the housing element is required by the state of California, and it must be updated every 8 years and must be certified by HCD. As Alex mentioned, we're entering the sixth cycle, which runs from 2023 through 2031. And the process that we implement these housing elements is dictated by the state. So our goal is to meet that statutory deadline of January 31st, 2023, hopefully tonight with the adoption of the housing element. Now, a cornerstone of that housing element is the regional housing needs allocation, and then the city's sites inventory. So as you all have heard me say multiple times, that the state forecasts each region's both existing and projected housing needs, which is called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA for short. And later on, I'll discuss and describe what that RHNA is for the city and how the city's sites inventory in the housing element accommodates the RHNA with a buffer for those low income households. Next slide. So you'll see here just a very simple illustration of the housing element process. With each step in the process, the community had an opportunity to provide input and guidance on plan direction. So we're currently in that fourth phase, and we released the hearing draft of the housing element for your consideration that's in front of you this evening. Next slide. So specific to the housing element, we want to just kind of walk through that process so you're aware of the steps that we took since we were last in front of you in September as a full group. So we released the public review draft of the housing element for review on August 30th for 30 days. During that time, we met with Planning Commission, hosted a community meeting, and then met with you on September 20th on that public review draft housing element. We also popped up at the Great Mall Farmers Market and facilitated discussion with the city's Community Development Roundtable and the Santa Clara Housing Collaborative's Equity Working Group. We also had a community survey out for public review and received a number of direct comment letters. So working with city staff, we consolidated all those comments on the housing element and made changes to the plan. We submitted that revised draft of the housing element to HCD for review on October 17th. They had a 90-day period to review the document and to provide us with their comments on the document. In December, we started meeting with HCD as we met with them 3 times during December, and they provided us a preliminary checklist of the kinds of issues that they identified in the housing element. So with those comments, we revised the housing element and we posted it for public review on December 30th, and then resubmitted it to HCD on the Friday, January the 6th. So their comment letter that is in your packet tonight, we received is on that second draft that we realized and sent to them. And I'll describe a little bit later on in the presentation. Next slide. So overall, during the planning process, we really worked closely with city staff to tailor our specific engagement activities to hear from residents, businesses, housing developers, and more. We launched our project website to widely share project and housing element resources, conducted stakeholder interviews with over 30 stakeholders, hosted 15 community-wide meetings, and surveyed a broad range of community members to really listen and learn about housing needs, issues, opportunities, and policy ideas for the housing element. During that time, we also worked really closely with city staff to provide interpretation and translation support to provide opportunities for participation from as many segments of the community as we could. And the city offered interpretation in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin during our virtual workshops, while also providing embedded translations in our project websites and bilingual flyers and surveys. Staff even went door to door early on in the process at Sunny Hills, dropping off flyers to talk about the housing element and how to get engaged in our first set of engagement activities. Next slide. So onto the housing element itself. So the element is really organized into 5 distinct chapters. Our plan describes the relationship between the housing element and general plan. Our conversation highlights the variety of community engagement activities and what we heard during those activities. Our story highlights our past accomplishments, profiles demographic and socioeconomic considerations, and describes housing constraints within Milpitas. Our future housing need details the regional housing needs allocation and shows the adequate sites to meet the RHNA. And then our housing plan provides sort of the goals, policies, and programs for the document itself and moving forward. Our team conducted a significant amount of technical analysis about housing needs, constraints, opportunities, and more. This analysis, along with what we heard through the engagement process, really lays the foundation for that continuation and enhancement of those city programs. All that technical work and a summary of that community engagement is included in 7 technical appendices to the housing element. But tonight we're really going to focus on 2 components. I would say kind of some of the key components of the housing element, which are the housing sites inventory or our future housing needs and the housing plan itself. Next slide. So as you know, a cornerstone of the housing element is really the regional housing needs allocation or the RHNA and then the city's site inventory. It's the city's responsibility through the housing element to identify sites to accommodate the RHNA. So for the 6th housing element cycle, the one we're just entering into now, the RHNA for Milpitas is 6,713 units. This is about a 200% increase or double the 5th cycle RHNA for the city. Now, this is due to changes in state law that require consideration for not just future housing needs, but also unmet existing needs. And this chart also shows the breakdown of the RHNA by income level for the 5th and 6th cycle. So you can see a big increase in the number of units across all of those different income levels. This chart also shows us how well the city has done in meeting the RHNA during the 5th cycle. So that's the sort of the middle bar. Through 2021, the city had permitted over 3,000 housing units, a little less than the RHNA. However, as you can see, the city has done that primarily through permitting housing for above moderate incomes. Now, Milpitas, like other communities, has not been able to meet the RHNA for lower and moderate income housing. And this reflects challenges associated in building housing for low and moderate income housing with limited state and local funding to meet those housing needs. But likewise, as many of you know, the city's affordable housing ordinance went into effect in 2018. So projects entitled before that date were not subject to that inclusionary requirement. These are similar trends that you see for cities across the Bay Area and across the state overall. Next slide. So to complete the sites inventory, we went through a multi-step process where we ensure that there's adequate sites to meet that RHNA. And on the screen now is that sites inventory. So first, we identify credits towards the RENA, which include ADUs and pipeline projects. Parcels shown in red are those pipeline projects. And we also have ADUs, which are not currently mapped, but are calculated using an average number of permitted units over the last 3 years. Next, we subtracted the remaining RENA from the credits from that sort of total RENA. Then what we do is we identify other opportunity sites based on criteria like parcel size, ownership, whether it's an underutilized parcel, whether it's vacant, and whether there's known developer interest on that site. We have in kind of that orange color, what we call those opportunity sites. And we have a third category called rezone sites. These include potential housing opportunity sites that are candidates for redevelopment, but would require rezoning to allow residential uses or higher density residential uses. Now, as you can see, most of these sites are located within the Metro and Gateway Main Street specific plan areas, kind of consistent with that land use vision from the general plan. Next slide. And here's sort of a zoom in to the northern portion of the city with sites you can see along Dixon Landing and California Circle and along Calaveras Boulevard. Slide. And here is a zoom to the southern half of Milpitas. So as you can see, most of the sites again are in the Metro plan area and the Gateway Main Street specific plan areas. Slide. So here's a summary table where we actually compare all those numbers associated with each of those parcels. So we have the RENA by income level across that top row in orange. We list those potential ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and pipeline projects as credits, and subtract those from the RENA to arrive at the remaining RENA. So we need to accommodate about 4,344 additional units on opportunity and rezone sites. So that's that kind of middle orange color. So with those opportunity sites and rezone sites, we have about 7,000 units, a surplus of about 2,685 units over the remaining RENA. Now, it's important to note that HD wants us to have a buffer of about 15 to 30% on the low and very low income units. So when we combine those two categories, we have a surplus of about 400 units or an 18% buffer. So in sum, you can see that the site's inventory accommodates the required RENA and that low income buffer with a good surplus moving forward into the future. Next slide. So transitioning now from that site's inventory into the housing goals and programs for the housing element, you'll see now on the screen are the 6 cycle housing element goals. These goals are really intended to describe the end state or where we want to be in the future. And like the 5th cycle, the goals cover housing sites and production, existing housing resources, housing diversity, fair housing, and conservation and sustainability. They also cover a handful of new topics like special needs populations, the unhoused population, connection to mobility, and implementation capacity. Like other general plan elements, the 6 cycle goals include a series of housing policies to guide future decision making. Next slide. So here on the screen are the housing programs, or rather a different way to think about them are the activities that city staff will continue or take on over the next 8 years to support the city's vision for housing. These are the same set of housing programs that we presented to you in September, and then also to the Housing Subcommittee earlier this month in January. Unlike our earlier meeting, so we're not going to go through these programs in great detail. Rather, we're going to spend the next few slides describing the changes that were made to the housing plan based on public comments received and then comments received by HCD. So again, this is to tell you the differences from what we presented to you back in September to now. So you can see those changes. Next slide. So as we mentioned before, that input was from the public comment period, and HCD was directly integrated into the housing element. This slide really summarizes some of those changes to the housing programs, again, since that public review draft back in September. These changes include adding actions related to continually engaging property owners and developers who have exhibited interest in redeveloping their properties, additional actions and timelines for city-owned sites in the site's inventory, revising actions related to housing for persons with disabilities and their caregivers, monitoring and continual review of the city's ADU ordinance as we know, as state law continues to change around ADUs, reflecting ongoing coordination between the city and the San Andreas Regional Center, updating and reflecting the city's ongoing rent relief programs and assistance programs to make sure that there are actions within the housing element, updating the anti-displacement program with a new tenant survey to understand their needs and what types of activities they need moving forward, and then adding detail for at-risk housing like Sunny Hills if a notice of intent is filed for that site in the future. Next slide. Additionally, we made these changes to programs 15 through 24. So this includes, again, revising some of these actions related to housing for persons with disabilities and their caregivers, adding actions to prioritize water and sewer services for lower income households consistent with state law, adding zoning ordinance updates for things like supportive housing, SROs, and procedural updates for SB 35 projects, really to make sure that the city's ordinances are consistent with state statutes, reflecting the tiny home study and permit streamlining, including new state legislation that passed last October, and then adding a metric for missing middle housing and revised actions for development standards and incentives associated with those missing middle households. So all of these revisions to the programs were incorporated into the version of the housing element that you have before you for consideration this evening. Now, next, you can go to the next slide. So this is part of that was part of the housing, all those programs were part of the revised housing element that we submitted to HCD for review earlier this year, in which we received our comment letter from. So we received that comment letter on the housing element that includes these programs, and they had a handful of additional comments that they want to make sure that we address before finalizing that housing element and sending it to HCD for their final review and consistency check. So these really focus primarily on expanded analysis around housing constraint, past development trends, and fair housing. So this includes expanding the analysis of the unhoused population in the city and housing quality for the affirmatively furthering fair housing appendix. This includes expanding the analysis of redevelopment trends for housing projects and new analysis for emergency shelters in the future housing needs or sites inventory. And this includes expanding the analysis of existing land use and zoning standards on recent projects to make sure that they don't constrain housing in the housing constraints appendix. Now, since we received this letter on January 10th, we've met a few times internally as a group and a team, and we've been actively working both with city staff that are on the call or on this meeting tonight, but also those in building safety, police, and others, plus our team, and then HCD to really expand the analysis as they recommend to make sure that the housing element is in full compliance. Now, next slide. So on the screen now are sort of the next steps in the process. So if council approves the adoption of the housing element this evening, the next steps would kind of roughly follow this order. We'd work with the city and HCD to revise the housing element based on that comment letter and those expanded analysis that I just mentioned on the previous slide. And then any additional comment that you have this evening or changes that you'd like us to make. We would then post a revised draft of the housing element to the housing element website, which is milpitashousingelement.com. We will then email individuals and organizations who previously requested notices on the housing element or been involved in the process. And then after it's posted for 7 days, we'll then submit it to HCD for their review. Now, HCD has 60 days to review the latest housing element and then respond with any further clarifications, comments, and to confirm compliance and certification. So those are the next steps on the process. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Alex to close us out for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next slide, please. So tonight's recommendation is to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution pertaining to the 6th cycle draft housing element, approve an amendment to the Milpitas 2040 General Plan Environmental Impact Report, adopt General Plan Amendment GP 23-0001 to update the housing element for the 6th cycle period of 2023 through 2031. And lastly, adopt the 6th cycle draft Milpitas General Plan housing element update as substantially compliant by state law and authorizing the city manager or designee to respond to the California Department of Housing and Community Development's findings letter dated January 10th, 2023, and submit to HCD for compliance and certification. And with that, I will conclude the presentation. We have various members that will help on the Q&A. Of course, we have Assistant City Manager Ashwini Kantak with us, Director of Planning, Ned Thomas. If he's not with us at the moment, he will be joining us soon. Robert Musalam, who's our Housing Administrative Neighborhood Services Administrator. Hanson Hom, our Senior Special Projects Associate, and he's been with us since the beginning, 12 months plus. So thank you to Hanson. And of course, we have Eric and Antara Tandon, who's the Senior Planner Designer with Ramey Associates, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Eric Yurkovich, for your presentation. He is with the Ramey Associates, who developed the housing element for our city. So now I'm going to open the public hearing. Any in-person folks out there that would like to say anything regarding this item? Seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom?
We have Allison McDonald.
Hello, Allison, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor Montano and City Council members. I just wanted to really show appreciation to staff and Ramey Associates for their hard work, dedication in getting this done, hopefully by the deadline. I know it's been a lot of work, and I appreciated the outreach and the way that a lot of community input was incorporated into this to create a document that really supports the shared vision of our community for the future, where Milpitas will be a safe, diverse, and equitable community with opportunities for all. And just wanted to express appreciation for that. And especially grateful for the focus on Sunny Hills and also our homeless population. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So I will close the public
We have
hearing.
one more public speaker,
One more? Okay. Then we'll proceed.
Jamie Vasquez.
Proceed, Jamie. Jamie, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I want to give you, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So my name is Jaime Vasquez, and I represent the NorCal Partners Union out of Local 405. Today, I want to speak on 3 simple things that fall under the labor area standards that will benefit this community and for the future. I just want to say, so the first thing would be the use of the apprenticeship program. It helps develop, ensures the program protects and complete the time and up to standards. These apprentices are the future of building America. And local hire that will allow workers and their families to work in the communities that they live in instead of having to commute long hours, help them work. Healthcare for workers and their families. These are just 3 things. I believe that the housing element with pre-qualification language will help ease the housing burden we all face, and I hope you really take this into consideration. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Is there anyone else on Zoom?
There are no more speakers.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will close the public hearing and move on to council discussion. If you have some comments or questions, please put on your mic so I could see and I can call on you. Vice Mayor Chua?
Thank you, Mayor. Eric or Alex, on the attachment from the City Council Housing Subcommittee on it's actually page 274. Or if you want, you can go to program 22 on supportive housing. There is a second sentence to this. Are you guys okay? Eric? We're good. Okay. For the attachment A, page 274 under program 22, and HE update added text in bold under program 22. Supportive housing for persons with disabilities. Analyze suitability of sites, identify sites inventory for permanent supportive housing. Development and conduct community engagement about these sites. One of the things that I think that was discussed at the subcommittee is it is dependent upon any supportive housing. It's dependent upon the result or issues being resolved at the current 1000 Hillview. So if we have resolved all the issues that we're facing now with 1000 Hillview, then that should be under this comment. Is Eric, am I clear on that one?
So you're asking, I think what you're asking is to add an additional clause to that statement about making sure that you resolve any issues with that particular project, am I understanding, before taking on this next action step, is that correct?
Right. So we're learning from that supportive housing structure, and we're learning a lot, and it's been over a year now. And I think it will be prudent for us to use the experience that we have from that supportive housing to use it for the next project. So that's what I'm trying to get at. Also on the same page, which I kind of like, at the bottom of program 4, which is the ADU. By the end, okay, ADU already includes action by the end of 2024, pre-approved building permit plans for prototype ADU units, evaluate prefab ADUs to simplify and streamline the permitting process for homeowners. So we do have a streamlined process right now too, and that's a good comment to say we're improving. We need to improve more, even though we have a good streamlined process right now. And the one thing that I think we should include is I think you touch on it as well on your comment, to revisit, and which we do, revisit the funding, the ARPA funding for ADU. I like what I read on some of the other pages too, to revisit the incentives. Maybe the incentive that we have now, maybe we should add more to maybe double the size of ADUs in Milpitas. Because we have the funds, and I don't think we have used a lot of it. So for the staff, when we do review the ARPA funding, we need to we need to focus on maybe adding more incentives to the residents, so we'll have more ADUs. And that's all for now. I'll give the time to my colleagues.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chua. Is there anyone else? Councilmember Lin?
Thank you, Mayor. On that same note with Vice Mayor Evelyn Chua, Alex, would you please help me identify or at least clarify this? What is the correlation of the ADU's actual pricing versus the ABAC guidance? And are we seeing 30% of the ADUs coming in at the very low income and the low income levels?
Thank you, Councilmember Lin. I will look to our team here, our consultants, to answer
Absolutely. So when we do the sites, it's a great question. So when we do the sites inventory, we're allowed to use to take the existing ADU trend in the city and then extrapolate it over the 8-year period to get the total number of accessory dwelling units. Now, ABAG has did a study, kind of region-wide study, to identify what income levels those ADUs were being leased for, rented by. So those are those numbers we use to kind of identify what proportion of the total number of ADUs are for lower incomes, for moderate incomes, and then for above moderate incomes. And we use that as based on the kind of that trend that they've done and analysis that they've done. And that's a type of analysis that HCD accepts, because again, these are the kinds of things that they have provided guidance for. And so we use that as an accepted methodology to estimate the income levels for those different kinds of units.
Thank you for that. And I do have another comment for staff too. I want to thank your staff for working so hard in reaching out to HCD way before the deadline to make sure that we have the findings reviewed by the HCD. And now with the review coming back with 4 items found on there, I think is a very, very good report. And I know that you are working with the whole team to make sure that you develop the response for those 4 items, but keep us posted on that. And thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you, Councilmember Leanne. I just want to say that we're working with the premier consultant here in Ramey Associates, as well as sub-consultants. We have a great team, obviously, with our planning team and their expertise, and Hanson Hom, who's our senior special projects associate, has actually, or is currently working on 3, I believe, housing elements with Alameda as a planning commissioner, consulting with the city of East Palo Alto, and of course with us. And we're right on track. So thank you.
Great work. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Thank you, Councilmember Lian. Next, Councilmember Barbadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to trail on Vice Mayor's thoughts on ADUs, on the subcommittee questions and answered by the staff, why was ADU programs commenced at the end of 2024? Aren't we? I think it's in the chart. We have the ARPA.
So, Councilmember Barbadillo, can you pull your mic closer,
Yes,
so
sorry.
we can hear clearly? Thank you.
Yeah, just to trail on the Vice Mayor's comments on the ADU during the subcommittee for housing. Forgot which page is that. It was commented by the staff that things about ADUs happen at the end of 2024. By that far.
So are you asking a question for Eric
or
Yerkovich? Excuse me.
That's good. It's Yurkovich. It's phonetic. That's right. So actually, your ADU programs are ongoing. So if you look at the housing element itself, you'll see in the programs what we even did between the public review draft and this current draft is identify those programs that are ongoing. And with respect to the ADU program, the city has a lot of ongoing activities, right? You're already doing fee assistance for those homeowners. You already have a safe legalization program that's already going. You already have a development handbook and ADU toolkit. You promote ADU, you have an ADU Monday program, right? So those are ongoing activities that you're already doing. In addition to that, there are a couple additional action steps that are identified in here beginning in 2024 which is next calendar year, to really, again, look for new sources of funding to help with the incentivize these programs, and then to kind of look at approving kind of prototypical prefab ADUs, right, to help streamline the production of ADUs in the city. So you have a bunch of stuff that's already ongoing, and then those two are additional ones that are to begin next year.
all right. So it's an ongoing development for our ADU programs. All right. How much of the community comments were incorporated to this housing element program that we have that staff is drafting? The report both in September and today says that there's an extensive community output and outreach. So which part of the drafted housing element incorporates this extensive community input?
Alex, would you like me to start, or would you like to start?
Yeah, I was going to mention the dates and the meetings, but I know that you have more detail, and perhaps some of those meetings happened before I started with the house team. So yes, please do.
I could perhaps provide some background. This Hanson Holland Special Projects Associate. The public review process for the housing element, this has been about a 12-month process. And in previous discussions, the public outreach has happened in 3 phases. So at the very initial stage, and this was during the spring of this year, there were workshops and surveys done, and we gathered a number of comments that were incorporated into the administrative draft. And then during the summer, there was a phase 2, where we gathered further community comments, another committee workshop, pop-up meetings, surveys, online comments. And we received some letters also that we also considered very strongly in the next version of the housing element. And then the third phase, which Eric covered, was the official public review period that started at the end of August. And Eric kind of covered in his presentation the revisions that were done in response to that third phase. So there were actually, it's hard to kind of itemize all the revisions that was done over the past year, but they were done in 3 separate phases. So it was an iterative process of gathering the community feedback. I can tell you a lot of the comments that we received had to do with fair housing, the high cost of creating more affordable housing, special needs population, comments about ADUs, finding funding sources to finance affordable housing. But there were a lot of rich comments that were received during the public outreach period.
And it was very useful to the drafted housing elements as we see it now. Okay. Another question I have, so this is a year process, usually a 12-month process?
It could take longer. We were able to condense it in 12 months. Some cities have been working at it for 2 years or 18 months.
Okay, so it started, I think, the 6 updated
Oh, you're talking about the overall housing element
Right.
cycle? Yeah, I think it was back in, I think 1969 or so that housing element law was passed. Eric probably knows the exact date. So cities have been doing.
Okay. No. My
housing-
question is, like this 6 cycle. So
The
usually
sixth cycle,
every cycle.
the sixth cycle is, like it covers a period from 2023 to, to 2031. But usually each housing element cycle is historically has been like 4 to 6 years.
4 to 6 years. And you said that usually, before we can pinpoint the final draft, usually at least a year, 18 months, 2 years, some jurisdictions.
Yeah, I mean, we still have this process of, as Eric covered, where we'll submit this housing element if it's adopted tonight by the council to HCD. We'll further revise it to respond to the letter that we just received on January the 10th and submit to HCD. As Eric said, there's a period of time where eventually we hope we will get a certified housing element, hopefully by the end of April of this year.
The last HCD comment letter was January 10. No, my only question is with the time spent, with the expertise that we have, there's still 4 areas in which it's not
There's
to the HCD.
Yeah, I think that's good to point out. I can tell you I'm working on a couple of other housing elements that, and just knowing what other cities are receiving. The letters are very detailed and they're typically 10 to 15 pages. So the fact that we were able in our last effort of discussions with HCD to reduce the comments to these 4 critical areas is really, I would say, it's a very good achievement, which means we're getting much closer to certified housing element.
Oh, sorry, Hanson. I was just going to add that Antura reached out to HCD today in order to obtain additional direction. And there's been email correspondence as of today going back and forth. Plus, we as a housing element team are expecting to meet once again with the HCD representatives. And before we officially submit, based on information that we're gathering here tonight, and obviously responding to those 4 comments, before we formally submit, we'll have a conversation with them to ensure that we're following and are aligning so that hopefully we can get within that 60-day period, as Hanson was indicating, we can get compliance and certification as opposed to getting more comments.
So it's not due by the end of the month. So this submission is not due at the end of the month, no? You said April?
The adoption, city councils are required to adopt by January 31st. And that's why we're here tonight. But certification can happen after the city council adoption. And I'd invite the team here to correct me if I'm indicating or conveying that incorrectly.
Yeah, no, that's right, Alex. The adoption deadline is January 31st. However, there's still a period of time, interactions with HCD to reach certification of your housing element.
So what is recommended that we adopt tonight? The unfinished one, the incomplete one?
Tonight, the recommendation is to adopt the resolution, approving the addendum to the 2040 General Plan Environmental Impact Report, as well as adopting the General Plan Amendment to update the housing element. And then the last and obviously very important one is to allow us to proceed with adopting the housing plan as substantially compliant by state law and allowing the city manager or designee to respond to any comments from HCD moving forward. And we can put that slide up on the screen if you need that.
Oh, I can see that. It's the last
There it is.
recommended. All right. So you are trying to have us adopt not the finished product, but a substantially compliant product. I mean, housing element for further comments all responses to HCD's comment letter of January 10th.
That's correct, yes.
Will it cost us more with our consultants?
No, it's part of the scope of work and timeline, and we're aligning and tracking. So no, it would not affect the current budget.
So how far are we from the comments of HCD on their letter, January 10th? We're working on it. We're halfway through. Or where are we in terms of resolving the 4 issues?
Yeah, so as Eric indicated, we have had at least one meeting and discussed those 4 items, as well as we've been communicating via email between staff and consultants. So we're definitely moving along. The plan is to take your comments and feedback from tonight, and then the housing element team will regroup perhaps tomorrow or the next day, and continue in our formal response to HCD. If you're looking for a percentage of completeness, I'm not exactly sure where we are at the moment, perhaps around 50%, but city staff still owes Ramey Associates information.
And when does the council expect a report back?
So as Hanson was indicating, that once hopefully council approves and adopts tonight, then we would be substantially in compliance, and we would have this meeting with HCD to make sure that we're aligning on their comments. And then once we submit the revisions, they have 60 days to respond and either provide additional comments or what we're hoping for is compliance and certification.
Right, which is no later than April.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I would add to what Alex just mentioned is based on the letter that we received on January 10th, we're confident that the action by the council tonight to find that the housing element is substantially in compliance with state housing law, that finding can be made for the council tonight.
All right, with 50%, I think I'm okay. Progress from January 10th as replay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barbadillo. You can turn off your mic now. Is there anyone else? Councilmember Fan.
Yes, thank you. As you may know, this is something that has been in the works for quite some time. I don't have too many questions as I have asked them throughout the process, having served with my colleague, Councilmember Chua, on the Housing Subcommittee. Do want to commend our housing team, especially Director Andrade, for picking up additional duties and really leading the charge here on a housing element that I think is robust and addresses many of the looming issues going forward for our city. Of course, I want to acknowledge the work of our planning department as well, as our partners with Ramey Associates. And Hanson, thank you for your continuous feedback on this work here. I guess the question that I have is, a lot of cities have been getting less than positive letters about their housing element. Not every city is as open-minded as we are. And that said, these letters oftentimes come with the threat of litigation Have we received anything, remotely similar to that through our process?
Hanson, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Hanson. No, we have not. The HCD has been extremely cooperative with us. The fact that they were willing to meet with us 3 times for some really constructive conversations before the deadline letter was due has been a very positive relationship, constructive. And I think the fact that we're at where we are today is based on the cooperation that we've received from HCD. So there has not been any contentious issues with HCD at all. And I know there are cities out there that are in that position, but certainly Milpitas is not one of them.
What I would add also is that we certainly have received letters from community-based organizations like the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley, SV at Home, YIMBY, that have had specific recommendations and suggestions, but ultimately they have been quite positive, I would say.
Yeah, and we've tried to incorporate many of their comments into the housing element. We thought many of their comments were very valid.
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that is worth praise. And I'm very thankful of these advocacy organizations as well, because they play a huge role in the process. I know probably they aren't really providing comments tonight, but that's probably because they're busy giving other city councils a hard time. So I thank our staff for including them preemptively in the process. I think that's something that is gonna reap a lot of benefits for us. Their contributions are greatly valued. And at the end of the day, I'm very confident that our housing element is going to stand out from the rest of the region. And I would love to kind of see an analysis later on as to what we included in our housing element that other cities didn't, and how that correlates to the housing numbers when we take a look at it later on. So those are just my comments. Thank you again, staff, for your diligent work on this. I look forward to implementing a lot of these goals through policy.
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. So I'd like to make a few comments myself. Thank you, Eric Yurkovich and Hanson Home and Antara and Ashwini and Alex for all your hard work on this. The questions that I have, so when as I was reading this, some of the questions came to my mind. For example, when it says credits, can you explain more of the RENA credits? So I'm still having a hard time really grasping when we get a credit, what does that really mean? And I think a lot of people in the audience and the public need to know what exactly that means when you get credits. I don't know who would answer that question.
We're happy to do that. And I've talked a lot tonight, but maybe I would let my colleague Antra, who worked extremely hard on the site's inventory, to give you an explanation of what those 2 types of credits are. Antra?
Sure. So as per past experiences and HCD guidance, the city of Milpitas can count ADUs that are being projected over the next 8 years to be built, along with the pipeline projects that are either going through an approval process with the city or have already been approved. Those projects can be counted as credits. And then you can subtract those numbers, the actual number of units for each income category, and come to another line item, which is remaining RENA. And then from there onwards, it is our responsibility to find additional sites and predict or project in the future how many more units the city can add on those sites. So credits really include the ADUs and pipeline projects. And these are realistic numbers. These are reflecting actual numbers in applications and the ADU projection trends, which are also based on past trends in the city. So that's what credits really is.
Thank you for that. I think some folks were wondering what it really meant, but all it is really is, so ABAG, well, the HCD, the Housing Community Development from the state, they're mandating that we produce so many housing in our cities, and they give us a number, and these numbers are called RHNA numbers, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. I believe that's what it is. So when they give us that number and we produce so many, then we subtract it, and then those are the credits. Is that correct? But we're just subtracting what we just putting in. You know, like if I have the state is saying, I want you to build 100, you need to build 100 homes, and we build 50, so then we get 50 credits. Is that the way it works?
So the city can actually include what has been submitted in the pipeline during the course of the housing element being prepared. So those projects are expected to be completed in the 8-year cycle, which starts 2023 and 2030 and ends in 2031. So those are already approved. They're not built, they're not occupied, but are expected. So those count in credits and also ADUs, which we are projecting.
Those are in the pipeline. For example, we recently approved 100% affordable housing. So those are, but they haven't been built yet, but those are the credits. Okay, great. The other question I had, so this housing element, is it a goal or is it an action plan, or is it, because you said it needs to be certified. So once it's certified, it's final, right?
Yes, Mayor Montano, I do see that our planning director, Ned Thomas, is on, and I think this is a great question for him to respond, given his experience, and I may follow.
Okay, because when I say goal or an action plan, what I really want to know is this a work in progress? For example, all the comments that we're giving tonight, are you going to incorporate those to create the final one?
Yes, that's right. But we would have to then submit to HCD for the compliance and certification. Is your question more related to the next 8 years from 2023 through?
No, I'm talking about for this plan here. That's why I was. Are these goals, or is it like an action plan? Is it for this one here, for this phase?
Yeah. Yes. So I was looking at it as an element of the general plan, but yes, these are programs and actions that the city will take along with private developers and the community.
And then once we decide, once it's approved, is it set in stone? I mean, we can't change it anything for 8 years.
Ned or Hanson, have there been amendments to housing elements in the past?
You know, cities can certainly amend their housing elements during the 8-year period. There's nothing, you know, it's like would be like another general plan amendment, because this is essentially a general plan amendment. So while most cities have not amended their housing element during the cycle, there's nothing that prevents a city from adjusting it. In fact, the HCD, because you have to submit an annual report on the progress, it may suggest some additional changes based on the results of as you progress through the 8-year cycle. So
okay, well, that's good.
I would not say it's set in concrete, but it's meant to defy, I think in your earlier question, whether it's goals or it's an action plan, is both of those. You know, housing element includes goals, policies, and then the programs are kind of more specific than, say, other elements of the general plan, where they do require the city to identify target dates. And you'll see that when you see the programs is by 2024, by 2026, you're expected to accomplish these items. So it's more than goals, it is an action plan that HCD will monitor and expect cities to report out on an annual basis.
Thank
And
you for that, Hanson.
ha-
And so this is a living document, if you will.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is a living document.
And Mayor Montano, if I could just have maybe Eric or Hanson speak to kind of the capacity, additional capacity that's also built in, so that gives us some flexibility through the 8-year period. So we're not exactly at the numbers we need to reach, but we have other opportunity sites that build in capacity. So if maybe Eric or Hanson, you could speak to that.
I'll let Eric, if Eric wants to start off. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That's a great question. So as you remember from that chart with all of the arena and the credits and the remaining arena and then the capacity and then that surplus line. So part of what we do when we go through this process is identify additional housing sites to meet both the arena, but then additionally that low income buffer that was identified, that 15 to 30% buffer for those lower income units. But what that does is it creates this additional capacity by doing that, this additional buffer. So the sites that we've identified in the housing element themselves have more capacity than what's required under the arena. And this is kind of the result of kind of creating this buffer overall. But it really, what it will help you do over the next number of years, over the next 8-year period, is if, say, one site redevelops and it maybe redevelops at a little bit less density, or a site redevelops as a commercial site instead of residential, which has not actually been your trend in your city, then you have additional sites in here already, right, that kind of work through and become that sort of buffer for you over time as projects come online and as sites redevelop in the city. Now, there is a program which would be triggered. It's program number 1. And if your sites fall too low, especially for those very low and low income sites, you might have to find additional sites, which, as you might find out and you go through this process again, as city planning staff does this process with your housing team, you might find that some of the sites already exist in the metro plan area, but because you've gone 2 or 3 or 4 years down the line, you might know more about particular sites or particular projects. And just to say one last thing too, which is that overall, the sites inventory identifies the capacity to meet the arena overall. There are going to be other sites in the city that will redevelop it with housing that are not in the sites inventory very likely. So that is also beneficial to you overall. So they all kind of stack on to each other, but you do kind of have that built-in extra capacity within your housing element in your sites inventory overall.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add to what Eric was saying is, the housing element is an 8-year period. The general plan itself defines a larger housing potential for the city for a longer time horizon, over 20 years. So what sometimes occurs is that what you're supposed to do in the housing element is project which sites or have the potential of being redeveloped within the next 8 years. So it's kind of our best kind of guess based on all the information out there, talking to property owners of what are the sites that have the most potential to be felt within 8 years. And that's what HCD wants to hear. However, during the process, there could be a site that's not identified in the housing inventory, but is identified as housing in the general plan, where the developer comes forward and said, oh, I'd like to redevelop this site. And certainly that housing element does not prevent that site from moving forward with housing development if the general plan already identified those properties.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just one more question a couple more questions for Eric. So Eric, do you coordinate with the Housing Authority of Santa Clara County in terms of knowing, because we're talking about low-income housing and most of those are Section 8. Do you coordinate with the Santa Clara County Housing Authority to know how many low-income folks are in Milpitas that need that housing when you do your studies, your research? Because let me backtrack. So for example, you said you did, I think maybe it was Hanson, Dr. Hanson Hum, that you did a surveys to people that lived in Section 8, like for example, Sunny Hills. But the thing is, not people that live in Section 8 do not just live in Sunny Hills. They live in Selwyn area. They live in the apartments in different apartments in different cities, or even houses, people that are in Section 8. So that's why I'm wondering, how did you do your analysis? Because it's not Section 8 people are not just in Sunny Hills, they're all over the city. So I was wondering if you coordinate with the Santa Clara County to find out how many people are in Section 8.
We don't, so through this process, I believe city staff has worked with the Santa Clara County Housing Authority on a variety of things, including a project I think that might be moving forward as well, that has a component of affordable housing, supportive housing for formerly unhoused people. I know that the city is collaborating with them on that specifically. So one thing I would say is, what we do is pull information on project-based vouchers, which is what you talked about with Sunny Hills, right? So that's an existing project that has those vouchers associated with it. We do not do an inventory of those Section 8 vouchers around the city. I believe the housing needs assessment has a kind of a summary of those vouchers, but people move kind of consistently across time, right? And so kind of tracking longitudinally where people are using their vouchers over time is a kind of an ongoing target for cities. But we didn't do that piece of specific analysis, I think, that you're asking for.
Because I just think you're forgetting the other folks in the city. The other question I have is, you said you have a sites inventory, that you did a sites inventory of potential sites that could be high density, low income, and supportive housing and so forth. But did you do surveys for the neighborhoods that will be impacted, potentially impacted? For example, I'll give you a good example. We have one of the site inventories is in South Main Street. The nearest neighborhood is the Starlight Pines, but I don't think that they've been surveyed. So it makes sense to survey the neighborhood that is going to be the most impacted. And I don't think that was done, but I didn't see it in here. But I'm going to end in there, but I just wanted to give you some food for thought. But I do like Councilmember Fan's suggestion of doing some type of comparative analysis after all the cities turn in their, after all, it's been the housing element has been done. I think it would be good to see, where we stand comparing with all the other cities. But I think I have one more person that wants to speak. I think Vice Mayor, I'll let you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two comments, and it's on program 11, preservation at risk housing, page 275. Recently, it's been brought to my attention that there are vacancies over at the Terrace Garden. So somehow, because program 11 addresses Sunny Hills, I would like to see a plan or a strategy, a structured way of making sure that the Sunny Hills residents are aware, mostly seniors that are very low income, that are aware of the openings over at Terrace Garden. It has to be structured, it has to be planned, it has to be available to the Sunny Hills residents. I would like to see that somewhere there, somewhere under program 11. The other one I have is the miscellaneous comments. This the first time I've seen this one. I didn't see it at the housing subcommittee. And this is probably a good question for feedback from Mr. Hanson. you said that implement the housing element and other programs to qualify the city for pro-housing program administered by California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, to receive preference in scoring for competitive housing, community development, and infrastructure programs. What exactly are we getting if we have this housing element? What are we? What is the potential that we can tap on?
Yeah, thank you, council member. I think that's an excellent question. You know, this program was developed by the state, and I think last year might have been the first year they initiated it. I'm not sure how many cities have been designated the pro-housing destination, but when we researched it, the state indicated and that it could be like a more competitive advantage for certain grants, whether they're housing grants or whether they're transportation grants or other types of opportunities like that, is what has been identified. I think the program is still in the developmental stages as far as exact benefits that can be accrued. But at this point, the state has outlined a list of, I think, about 10 criteria that can be taken into consideration for scoring, and then you have to meet a certain number of points or criteria in order to get that designation. We think that that could be advantageous for the city, you know, because if there are some advantages that are defined for certain grant programs that have, and for cities that have that pro-housing designation, it just gives us the extra edge.
So you think with the 10 elements, the 10 categories we comply with, and then we can get this pro-housing designation, correct?
Yeah, and looking at the criteria, I mean, we haven't done a detailed assessment. We've tried to identify items in the housing element that will get us there. At this point, I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but with implementation of some of the housing element programs, I think it'll put us in a stronger position to apply for that designation.
So that being said, then that's going to be one of the goals, is to make sure we comply with those criteria so we can get this pro-housing designation. And also, I would like again to thank the team, you know, from Director Andrade to Eric and his team, and you, Mr. Hanson, and also Robert, and who else am I missing? Alex. You guys, I mean,
the planning department with Ned Thomas and
planning. Yes, I can't miss that one. And I know, Eric, you've been so detailed on the suggestions from Council Member Anthony Fan and myself during the subcommittees, and we appreciate that very much. And I could see the result is right here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I have a couple more questions. Well, they're not really questions, they're comments. And so I notice on page, this is with the specific plans, program 20, well, actually program 21, zoning code updates. The navigation center, I think that's an area that I would like to see, because it provides something temporary. Something is better than, you know, this provides a safe place where people that are working and that sleep in their cars, I think a navigation center would help them tremendously. So that's one of the areas I'd like to see. The other thing is that I had here, a couple of notes here, is, you know, our BMR right now in our housing element is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's right now it's 15% below market. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would like to increase it to 20% to provide more affordable, more of a stock for 5% more. So I would like to see that right now is the time to give our input. So that's one of my inputs is that I would like is increase it to 5% to 20% to low and moderate housing. And again, we want to see, I'm especially myself, I know, but I think a lot of people want balance. You don't want to have too much housing where we take away our balance, our commercial. There has to be a balance. So those are some of the thoughts that I'm stating right now, because I think that's the goal of this council. They want to make sure it's not only them, but I know a lot of people in the community, they want to make sure that there's a balance. And I think that's I think you guys know that, the staff, and Alex, you mentioned that. So with that, I don't see any more hands raised or any more mics, and I would like to call for the motion.
Mayor, I would like
Vice Mayor
to,
Chua.
thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a motion to approve, to adopt, let's just see. City Attorney, can you help me? Including all the suggestions from all of us.
So I think we would need to list the suggestions that we're discussing.
Okay.
So I think the best course of action would be to go ahead and list the suggestions that you want so that they're clear.
Okay. So I'm going to start with my suggestions, and then we go one by one, because each one of us has their own suggestions.
If you'd like to do that, you're welcome to do that.
Were you
And
able
then
to write down all the suggestions?
confirm at the end. I've written down notes of your comments. I'm not exactly sure they reflect the suggestions you intend to make.
Can we go ahead and read them, please?
So can I ask a clarifying question,
Sure.
Vice Mayor? So this is a work in progress, meaning that the input that we're giving you right now, staff, you're going to go back and you're going to come back again and get them. This is it.
This is not. This is for your adoption of the housing element and certification that it's in substantial compliance with California law.
I know, but
any amendments you make today would be posted to the website for 7 days. And then if certified, it would move forward to a check through, or sorry, if you guys certify it, it would move forward through a check with HCD. HCD could then choose to either make comments, return them, and ask for amendments to it, or to certify it, and at which point we would be done.
so those, it'll be certified today. And if we want to make some amendments or additions, now's the time.
So if you wanted to make amendments or additions, now would be the time to do so, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I'm going to try this again. Is that okay? It says here, okay, where is the oh, here you go. Okay, so move to approve an addendum to Milpitas 2040 General Plan Environment Impact Report, SCH 2020-070348. Adopt General Plan Amendment DP 23-0001 to update the housing element for the 6th cycle period of 2023 to 2031. Adopt 6th cycle draft Milpitas General Plan Housing Elements Update 2023-2031 as substantially compliant by state law, and authorizing the city manager or designee to respond to California Department of Housing and Community Development findings letter dated January 10th, 2023, and submit to HCD for compliance and certification with addendum as suggested by several of the council members. And City Attorney, do you have the list?
So what I've written down here is that Councilmember Chua, you'd like language about Hillview in program 4. You'd like note of the streamlined ADU process. In program 11, you'd like note that vacancies in terrace gardens should involve outreach to Hillview. And then I didn't fully understand your suggestion with regard to the pro-housing designation.
The goal is to meet the 10 criteria, so we become a pro-housing. Our housing element is a pro-housing document.
Okay.
That's it.
So
You
that
got
would be
it.
the goal, but I'm not sure that that's part of the
It's not.
housing. Okay.
Yeah,
It,
it's a comment.
sorry, it already is included in there.
Okay.
Oh, it is. Oh, awesome. There you go. So we don't need the last one. It's already included in the housing element.
And then
I just want to say I'm so proud of that last
The
point
last
made
one.
by was that
Speaking,
Hanson?
Anthony, Councilmember Fan, do you have I didn't see you had your hand, your mic. Thank
No,
you.
I'm just point of privilege there. And echoing my colleague here.
Okay.
Vice Mayor, I just wanted to clarify. So on the terrace gardens, I noticed, I heard the city attorney say Hillview, but I believe that was Sunny Hills. You wanted to make the connection between Sunny Hills
Yes.
residents,
Yes.
not terrace gardens necessarily.
Not-
I'm sorry, not Hillview. It was Sunny Hills.
Yes, Sunny
connection
Hills.
With terrace gardens.
Yeah, to make sure
Make
that
that
there's
connection.
this strong connection between the
Yes.
two, so they can avail, the Sunny Hills residents can avail whatever's available over at the terrace garden. Thank you, City Manager. And the next one, I think is,
And I believe everybody else's comments were not amendments to the housing element itself, but were just comments about what was going on. Mayor, I believe, asked about the outreach that was going on and mentioned that she appreciated program 21, the navigation center for the unhoused, but that wouldn't constitute a change to the recommended motion. And then the increase in below market rate properties to 20% is not part of this housing element, but would have to come back as an update to the ordinance. And I don't believe any of the other council members made specific edits or requested specific edits. So the motion, as I understand it, would be to adopt the resolution that includes approving the addendum to the environmental impact report, and that includes the adoption of the amendment of the general plan and the adoption of the 6th cycle draft Milpitas housing element, and making findings that it substantially complies with state law. Then authorizing the city manager to, or his designee, to make responses to HCD in addition to those edits, which of course my computer just turned off. Recommended by Councilmember Chua, that included mention of the Hillview program in the Hillview policies in program 4, mention of the streamlined ADU process, mention of the terrace gardens vacancies at Sunny Hills, and I believe that was it for amendments.
that's about it. Yes, thank you.
With-
Attorney.
With that clarification, I think it would be reasonable to call for a
Is there
second.
a second?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Fan. We're going to call the vote with the amendments.
Councilmember Barbadillo,
I
Vice Mayor Chua,
Aye.
Councilmember Lian,
Aye.
Councilmember Fan,
Aye.
Mayor Montano.
And myself is an aye. So this has passed unanimously with the amendments. I just want to say a couple of words regarding the housing element. You know, every 8 years we need to go through this. But what I did like when I heard from our consultants is that this is a work in progress. And if sometime in the future there needs to be some amendments or changes, I think that can happen. Am I correct? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Now moving on to announcements. City Manager McCarris.
Thank you, Mayor Montano, members of the council. With this special meeting, I have no announcements.
Thank you for that. Any council members have any announcements to make? Please turn on your mic. I can see.
Mayor,
Councilmember Hanen.
is this an appropriate time to give them a 1 minute silence to the victims, the mass shooting of Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay?
Is it an appropriate time? Oh, yeah, we could do. Actually, you can be the one to do it if you'd like to adjourn the meeting for in memory of the folks that were in for Monterey Park. So, yeah, you can. I'll have you do it when after announcements. Anybody else have any other announcements? I want to find out whatever happened to the car wash, because that's already been like 2 years. I'd like to find out what.
All I would say is with entitled projects, that's just up to the developer to produce a permit, and nothing's been received from the time of application or the time of approval to now.
So I can reach out to the applicant.
You could ask them. We don't track their.
I'm sorry, what?
We don't track their non. Would you say they're non-application? There's no application in. I could just tell you that there's no application in for a car wash.
So the.
It's
So all that-
incumbent on the property owner or the applicant, or in this case, the entitlement of it to move their project forward if they wish to build a project.
Yeah, so where, aren't they in the planning stage?
No, well, no, they have an entitled project because we have many entitled projects. But the next step would be for them to submit a building application to build their project. So
And they haven't.
They have not.
They have not, okay. Okay. So that's why I was wondering whatever happened to the car wash. There was, and also, I think there was one more thing that I want to say, but I can't remember. But Councilmember Hanlon, if you want to close the meeting in memory of, one before that, Councilmember Barbadillo.
Yes, I don't know if this is the right time in the council meeting, but I would like to request some report with regards to car break-ins in our city. Is that something that it needs to be agendized, or is it something that I can ask publicly?
So can you repeat that again? I didn't hear you. Can you meet close to the mic?
Right. I just spoke softly, Mayor. I'm looking for some data or report with regards to the car break-ins and robbery that we have in Milpitas.
Crime statistics.
Right, just statistics and probably in addition to that, what current programs we have or what policies do we need to curb that? I'm private at least 2 car break-ins in the last 5 days, and I was asked to ask it.
You know, as I recall, Vice Mayor Chua had asked the police department to give an update every 3 months on the crime stats, and this was And the catalyst for this was because of all the home key, all the crime that's been happening there. And there was just one last week again. And so from my understanding, city manager, the police department is to give us an update every 3 months. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. And we can get you, what I can do is let you know when the next update is coming up. We'll send you an email on when that's coming up, and then you'll have a report out from the police chief.
Okay, so that includes the concern of a car break-in?
Yes, exactly. That concern has actually been an issue with the council for the last at least 2-3 years now.
2 years.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been too long. That's okay.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit done, and we'll be happy to even forward you, we'll forward all the council information we've provided up to date, up to this date, so up to the last communication with you. So we'll get you up to date on it.
Right. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Councilmember Barbadillo. And as we all know, there has been an increase in crime, and I'll look forward to seeing that information. And now, Councilmember Han Lin, if you would have the honor of.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to motion to adjourn the meeting with a minute of silence to pay prayers to the victims of the mass shooting in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
that.
Mayor.
Meeting adjourned.